Alone in the face of despair, she didn't think twice. She took the forbidden car to save the child. But what she did afterward left everyone speechless. If you enjoy love and romance stories, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing. The autumn rain pelted against the windows of the sprawling Victorian mansion, perched on the edge of a cliff, overlooking the turbulent Atlantic Ocean. The estate stood as a testament to wealth and privilege in the small coastal town of Blackwater Cove, Maine. Yet despite its grandeur, a profound silence had settled within its walls since tragedy struck the Montgomery family 2 years ago. Olivia Bennett pulled her weathered sedan into the circular driveway, the tires crunching against the gravel as she took in the imposing structure before her. At 32, with her nursing degree gathering dust and her savings account nearly depleted, this job opportunity couldn't have come at a better time. 6 months of caring for an 8-year-old boy while his father managed the family's shipping empire seemed straightforward enough. The salary was generous, the accommodations included, and most importantly, it would give her the breathing room to figure out her next steps. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, gathering her courage before stepping out into the rain. The housekeeper who greeted her at the door had the kind of face that had seen too much but revealed nothing. Mrs. Reynolds, with her perfectly pressed uniform and steely grey hair pulled into a tight bun, led Olivia through the labyrinth of hallways adorned with paintings of stern-faced ancestors and maritime scenes. "Mr. Montgomery is very particular about his son's schedule," Mrs. Reynolds explained, her voice as crisp as her appearance. "Young Master Ethan hasn't been the same since the accident. The previous 3 nannies didn't last more than a few weeks each." A knot formed in Olivia's stomach. "I wasn't told the position had such a high turnover." Mrs. Reynolds paused, turning to face Olivia with an expression that softened almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Montgomery is a good man who's been through unimaginable pain, and the boy, he's just lost. They both need someone who won't give up on them at the first sign of difficulty." Before Olivia could respond, a door at the end of the hallway opened and a tall figure emerged. Even from a distance, there was no mistaking the commanding presence of James Montgomery. His tailored suit couldn't disguise the tension in his shoulders, and the lines around his eyes spoke of sleepless nights and constant worry. "Miss Bennett, I presume?" His voice carried down the hallway, deep and authoritative. "Yes, Mr. Montgomery. Thank you for this opportunity." He approached with measured steps, his handshake firm but brief. Up close, Olivia could see that beneath the carefully constructed facade of control, his eyes held a storm of emotions he fought to contain. "Mrs. Reynolds will show you to your quarters. Ethan is currently with his tutor. You'll meet him at dinner, which is served promptly at 6. We'll discuss your duties in my study afterward." Without waiting for a response, he turned and disappeared through another door, leaving a lingering scent of expensive cologne and unspoken grief. Mrs. Reynolds gave Olivia a knowing look. "Come along, dear. Best get you settled." The East Wing guest suite assigned to Olivia was more luxurious than any place she'd ever lived. Her 4-poster bed dominated the room, flanked by windows that offered a spectacular view of the ocean. A small sitting area with a fireplace provided a cozy retreat, and the adjoining bathroom featured a clawfoot tub that beckoned after her long drive. As she unpacked her modest belongings, Olivia couldn't help but feel like an imposter in this world of opulence. She thought about the path that had led her here, graduating with honors from nursing school, landing her dream job at Boston Children's Hospital, and then watching it all crumble when her mother's illness required her full-time care. 3 years of her life devoted to easing her mother's passing, and now here she was, starting over at an age when most of her peers were established in their careers. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. When she opened it, she found herself looking down at a small, solemn-faced boy with unruly dark hair and eyes that seemed too old for his young face. "You're the new nanny," he stated matter-of-factly, studying her with an intensity that was unsettling. "I am. My name is Olivia. You must be Ethan." He nodded, still appraising her. "You won't last either." The bluntness of his statement caught her off guard. "And why is that?" "Because nobody stays here. Not since Mom." His voice trailed off, and for a moment, the carefully constructed mask of indifference slipped, revealing the raw pain underneath. Olivia knelt down to his level, meeting his gaze directly. I'm not everybody, Ethan. And I'm not here to replace anyone, I'm just here to help for a while. He seemed to consider this, his small brow furrowing. Do you know how to make hot chocolate with extra marshmallows? A smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. As a matter of fact, I make the best hot chocolate in New England, with or without cinnamon, depending on the customer's preference. For the briefest moment, a flicker of interest crossed his face before the walls came back up. I like cinnamon, he said quietly, then turned and walked away, his small shoulders squared with a dignity that broke Olivia's heart. The Montgomery dining room could have easily accommodated 20 guests, making the 3 people seated at one end of the massive table seem lost in its grandeur. Dinner was a formal affair, served by Mrs. Reynolds with military precision. The silence was punctuated only by the clink of silverware against fine china and the occasional murmur of, "Please pass the salt." James Montgomery sat at the head of the table, his attention divided between his barely touched meal and the emails he surreptitiously checked on his phone. Ethan pushed his food around his plate, occasionally glancing at Olivia with curious eyes. "Ethan, please eat your vegetables," James said without looking up from his device. "I'm not hungry," the boy replied, his voice small but defiant. James finally set his phone down with a sigh. "We've discussed this. Growing boys need proper nutrition." The clinical tone made Olivia wince inwardly. She'd seen this dynamic before during her hospital days. Parents who loved their children deeply, but had forgotten how to communicate with them, especially after trauma. "I could help with that," she offered gently. "When I worked at the children's hospital, we had some creative ways to make vegetables more appealing." James regarded her with surprise, as if he'd forgotten she was there. "Ms. Bennett, while I appreciate your professional background, I prefer to handle my son's discipline myself." "It's not about discipline, Mr. Montgomery," she responded, careful to keep her tone respectful but firm. "It's about making healthy choices appealing. Sometimes a small adjustment in presentation can make all the difference." Ethan watched this exchange with growing interest, his eyes darting between the 2 adults. After a moment's consideration, James gave a curt nod. "Very well. You may implement your methods, but I expect results." The rest of the meal passed in strained silence. When Ethan was excused to prepare for bed, James led Olivia to his study, a masculine space dominated by dark woods, leather-bound books, and the subtle scent of brandy. "Please sit," he gestured to one of the chairs facing his imposing desk. As he took his seat, the warm glow of the desk lamp highlighted the exhaustion etched into his features. "I believe in clarity, Ms. Bennett, so let me be direct. My son has been through a traumatic experience. 2 years ago, his mother and I were involved in a sailing accident off the coast. I survived. She did not. Ethan hasn't been the same since, and frankly, neither have I." The raw honesty of his statement hung in the air between them. "I'm very sorry for your loss," Olivia said softly. He acknowledged her condolence with a slight incline of his head. "Ethan has become withdrawn. His academic performance has suffered, and he's developed anxieties that interfere with normal childhood activities. The therapist believes a stable presence in his life could help, hence your position." James slid a folder across the desk. "Inside you'll find Ethan's schedule, dietary requirements, medical information, and emergency contacts. Mrs. Reynolds manages the household, but you'll report directly to me regarding Ethan's well-being. I work long hours, often travel for business, but I expect daily updates and I check in with Ethan every night, regardless of where I am in the world." As Olivia leafed through the meticulously organized documents, she couldn't help but notice they read more like an operations manual than a guide to caring for a child. "Mr. Montgomery, this is very thorough, but if I may ask, what does Ethan enjoy doing? What makes him laugh? What comforts him when he's upset?" The question seemed to catch James off guard. He leaned back in his chair, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his usually composed features. Before the accident, he loved sailing and building elaborate structures with his blocks. He had an infectious laugh that could light up a room. A shadow passed across his face. Now he rarely laughs. As for comfort, I'm afraid I've not been as available as I should have been. The admission clearly cost him, and Olivia felt a pang of empathy for this man, who was clearly drowning in his own grief while trying to keep his son afloat. "Children are remarkably resilient, Mr. Montgomery. With patience and consistency, we might see glimpses of that boy again." "I hope you're right, Miss Bennett. For both our sakes. The conversation shifted to practicalities. Olivia's days off, compensation, house rules. By the time she was dismissed, the rain had stopped and moonlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the ornate hallway. As she made her way back to her suite, a small sound caught her attention. Following it, she found herself outside Ethan's bedroom, where muffled sniffles emanated from behind the partially closed door. She knocked gently. "Ethan, may I come in?" When no answer came, she pushed the door open slightly. The boy was sitting on his window seat, knees pulled up to his chest, tears streaming down his face as he clutched a framed photograph. "Go away," he mumbled, hastily wiping his eyes. Instead, Olivia entered and sat on the edge of the window seat, careful to give him space. "You know, when I'm sad, sometimes it helps to talk about it, and sometimes it helps just to have someone sit with you." Ethan said nothing, but he didn't ask her to leave again. They sat in silence, watching the moonlight dance across the waves below. After several minutes, he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Today's her birthday." Olivia's heart constricted. "Your mom's?" He nodded, turning the frame so she could see the photograph. A beautiful woman with Ethan's same dark hair and a smile that radiated joy, her arms wrapped around a younger, laughing Ethan on the deck of a sailboat. She always made her own birthday cake, chocolate with raspberry filling. She said store-bought cakes didn't have enough love in them. His voice caught on the last word. "She sounds like an amazing mom." She was. Dad forgot what day it is. He always remembers everything, but he forgot this. The betrayal in his voice was palpable. Olivia chose her words carefully. "Sometimes, when people are in pain, they try to forget days that make them sad. It doesn't mean they don't care. It just means their heart is still healing." Ethan considered this, his young face solemn. "Does it ever stop hurting?" "The hurt changes over time," she answered honestly. "It becomes something you can carry with you, instead of something that stops you from moving forward. And the happy memories start to feel good again, not just sad." He traced his mother's face with one small finger. "I'm afraid I'll forget her." "Would you like to tell me about her? That's one way to keep memories alive, by sharing them." And so, in the quiet of his room, Ethan began to talk. He told Olivia about his mother's terrible singing voice that didn't stop her from belting out songs in the car, how she could identify any seashell on the beach, and how she always kept cinnamon candies in her purse because they were his favorite. As his eyelids grew heavy, Olivia gently suggested it was time for sleep. She helped him into bed, tucking the covers around him with care. "Will you be here tomorrow?" he asked, uncertainty clouding his eyes. "Yes, Ethan, I'll be here tomorrow." "Promise?" "I promise." As she turned to leave, his small voice stopped her once more. "Miss Bennett, do you think we could make Mum's birthday cake tomorrow, so she knows we didn't forget?" Olivia felt a lump form in her throat. "I think that's a wonderful idea. And you know what? I bet you're just the person to teach me how to make it exactly right." A ghost of a smile touched his lips as he nodded and finally closed his eyes. In the hallway, Olivia nearly collided with James, who stood frozen outside his son's door, an expression of naked anguish on his face. "Mr. Montgomery, He held up a hand to stop her, struggling to compose himself. "Catherine's birthday," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "How could I have forgotten?" Before Olivia could respond, he straightened, the mask of control slipping back into place. "Thank you for attending to Ethan. Good night, Ms. Bennett." As he walked away, his steps heavy with unspoken grief, Olivia couldn't help but feel she'd glimpsed the real man behind the austere facade, a man as lost and broken as his son. The following weeks fell into a rhythm. Mornings were devoted to helping Ethan with his homeschooling, afternoons to outings designed to gently coax him out of his shell, walks along the beach collecting interesting stones, visits to the local aquarium, and cooking projects that invariably left the kitchen in cheerful disarray. James remained a peripheral figure, appearing briefly at breakfast before disappearing into his home office or departing for business trips. Yet Olivia noticed subtle changes. He began asking Ethan about his day at dinner, brought back small souvenirs from his travels, and occasionally joined them for movie nights, though he seemed perpetually distracted. It was during one such evening, with Ethan nestled between them on the sofa watching an animated film, that Olivia caught James watching her instead of the screen. The intensity of his gaze made her pulse quicken, and when their eyes met, He looked away quickly, as if embarrassed to be caught. The moment was interrupted by Mrs. Reynolds, who appeared at the doorway with a concerned expression. "Mr. Montgomery, there's an urgent call from the London office." With a sigh, James excused himself, ruffling Ethan's hair as he left, a gesture that would have seemed casual from any other father, but represented a significant step for him. "He's trying," Ethan said unexpectedly, his eyes still on the movie. "What do you mean?" Olivia asked. "Dad. He's trying to be better. He forgets sometimes, but he's trying." There was a wisdom in his observation that belied his 8 years. "Yes, he is," Olivia agreed softly, "and so are you." Later that night, after tucking Ethan in, Olivia found herself drawn to the terrace overlooking the ocean. The night was clear, stars scattered across the velvet sky like diamonds, and the rhythmic sound of waves breaking against the cliffs below provided a soothing backdrop to her thoughts. She'd been at the Montgomery home for nearly a month, and despite her initial reservations, she'd grown fond of the quiet boy with old eyes and his reserved father. Perhaps too fond, she admitted to herself. The occasional glimpses of vulnerability beneath James's controlled exterior stirred something in her that she hadn't felt in a long time. A dangerous attraction she had no business entertaining. "Beautiful night." The voice startled her, and she turned to find James standing a few feet away, his tie loosened and a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. "Yes, it is," she agreed, willing her heart to slow its sudden racing. He moved to stand beside her at the railing, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Ethan asked if you could accompany us to the charity gala next weekend. The invitation includes a +1, and apparently he's concerned I'll be, and I quote, boring and talk about business all night." A smile tugged at her lips. "He's becoming quite the social critic." "Indeed." James took a sip of his drink. "You've been good for him, Miss Bennet. I've seen more progress in these few weeks than in the past 2 years. He's an incredible child, Mr. Montgomery, perceptive, kind, resilient. He just needed someone to listen." James turned to face her, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. "And what about you, Olivia? Who listens to you?" The use of her first name and the unexpected personal question caught her off guard. I write in my journal, and I call my friend Sarah in Boston occasionally. But no family? No one waiting for you to come home?" She shook her head, suddenly conscious of how close they were standing. "My mother was my only family. She passed away last year after a long illness. That's why I took this position, actually. I needed a fresh start." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "So we're both running from grief in our own ways." "I prefer to think of it as moving towards something new rather than running away," she replied. He considered this, swirling the liquid in his glass. "A more optimistic perspective than mine, certainly." After a moment's hesitation, he added, "The gala is black tie. If you need, that is, there's a personal shopper in town who can assist with appropriate attire. I'd be happy to arrange it." "That's very generous, but please consider it a business expense. These events can be tediously formal, and I wouldn't want you to feel uncomfortable." Before she could respond, the French doors behind them opened, and Ethan appeared in his pajamas, looking small and frightened. "Dad? Olivia? I had the dream again." In an instant, James set down his glass and moved to his son, kneeling to his level. "The sailing one." Ethan nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "Come here, buddy." James opened his arms and Ethan fell into them, burying his face against his father's shoulder. Over the boy's head, James met Olivia's gaze with a silent plea for help. "How about some warm milk with honey?" she suggested gently. "And maybe we can all sit in the library for a bit. I find that sometimes a change of scenery helps chase the bad dreams away." So they settled in the library, Ethan sandwiched between them on the leather sofa, sipping warm milk as James read aloud from a well-worn copy of Treasure Island, a book he revealed had been his own favorite as a boy. Gradually, Ethan's eyelids grew heavy, and he drifted off to sleep, his head resting trustingly against his father's arm. "I should carry him back to bed," James whispered, but made no move to do so, as if reluctant to disturb the moment of peace. "In a minute," Olivia agreed, equally reluctant to break the spell that had settled over them, this fragile simulacrum of family they'd created in the quiet hours of the night. As she watched James gently stroke his son's hair, his guard completely lowered, Olivia felt something shift inside her, a recognition that despite her best intentions, She was falling for both the man and the boy. And in this world of wealth and privilege so far removed from her own, that realization was as dangerous as it was undeniable. What she didn't know was that someone else had been watching their growing closeness with mounting concern, someone who had their own plans for the Montgomery family and saw Olivia Bennet as nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle to be removed. The charity gala for the Blackwater Cove Children's Hospital was the social event of the season, transforming the historic Grand Harbour Hotel into a glittering showcase of wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the ballroom, where Maine's elite gathered in their finest attire, the air humming with classical music and the gentle clink of champagne flutes. Olivia stood in the entrance, momentarily overwhelmed by the opulence surrounding her. The midnight blue gown she'd selected with the help of James's recommended personal shopper draped elegantly over her figure, making her feel simultaneously beautiful and like an imposter. She'd spent her adult life in scrubs and practical clothing. This world of silk and diamonds was foreign territory. "You look like a princess," Ethan declared, appearing at her side in a miniature tuxedo that made him look older and somehow more vulnerable at the same time. She smiled down at him, grateful for his presence. "And you, sir, look like the most handsome gentleman in the room." James approached from behind, and Olivia's breath caught at the sight of him in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. He'd always been attractive in an austere, unapproachable way, but tonight, with his dark hair slightly less controlled and a hint of warmth in his eyes, he was devastating. "Miss Bennet," he said, his gaze traveling over her with unmistakable appreciation. "You look remarkable." "Thank you," she replied, fighting a blush. "And please, after 6 weeks of living in your home, I think you can call me Olivia." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Olivia, then. Shall we?" He offered his arm, and with Ethan on her other side, they entered the ballroom as a unit. The symbolism wasn't lost on Olivia. To outside observers, they must look like a family. The thought both warmed and warned her. "James, there you are." A woman in her early 40s glided toward them, elegant in a crimson gown that complemented her auburn hair. Her smile was dazzling, her handshake firm as she introduced herself to Olivia. "Victoria Harrington. I've been James's financial advisor for years, and I've heard so much about you from little Ethan here." "All good things, I hope," Olivia replied, noting how Victoria's hand lingered on James's arm, a beat too long. "The best," Victoria assured her, though something in her eyes didn't match her warm tone. "James tells me you're a nurse by training. How fascinating. I'd love to hear more about your career transition." The slight emphasis wasn't lost on Olivia. Before she could respond, Ethan tugged at her hand. "Olivia, can we see the ice sculpture? Please?" Grateful for the escape, she excused herself, leaving James and Victoria engaged in what appeared to be a familiar conversation. As the evening progressed, Olivia found herself enjoying the event more than she'd anticipated. Ethan proudly introduced her to his tutor and a few children from the sailing club his father had recently encouraged him to rejoin. James moved through the crowd with easy confidence, periodically returning to check on them, his hand occasionally resting lightly on the small of her back in a way that sent warmth cascading through her. "He likes you, you know," a voice commented, as Olivia stood by the dessert table watching James across the room. She turned to find an elderly woman regarding her with shrewd eyes. "I'm sorry?" "James Montgomery. I've known that boy since he was in short pants, and I haven't seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you since Catherine was alive." The woman extended a bejeweled hand. "Eleanor Blackwood. Catherine was my goddaughter." "Olivia Bennet. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Blackwood." "The pleasure is mine, dear. That little boy has been through so much, and James—" Eleanor shook her head. "Let's just say grief can make prisoners of us all. It's good to see some light returning to their lives." Before Olivia could formulate a response to this unexpected observation, Victoria appeared beside them, her smile tight. "Eleanor, darling, the hospital board is asking for you. Something about naming the new pediatric wing." As Eleanor excused herself, Victoria turned to Olivia. "Enjoying yourself?" "Very much. It's a beautiful event." Victoria sipped her champagne, her eyes never leaving Olivia's face. "You know, I've been concerned about James lately. He's always been so focused, so driven. But recently, he's been distracted, missing meetings, leaving the office early." Very unlike him. The implication hung in the air between them. Perhaps he's simply recognizing the importance of balance, Olivia suggested evenly. His son needs him. Of course, Ethan's well-being is paramount, which is why I worry about attachment that might prove temporary. Victoria's gaze sharpened. Children become so easily confused about roles, don't they? Especially vulnerable children like Ethan. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. A server had dropped a tray of glasses, the crash momentarily silencing the room before the buzz of conversation resumed. When Olivia turned back, Victoria had disappeared into the crowd. Unsettled by the exchange, Olivia sought out Ethan and found him by the windows with James, both of them looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen them. Something in her chest tightened at the sight. The progress they'd made as a unit was undeniable, but Victoria's warning echoed in her mind. What right did she have to insert herself into their healing process? And what would happen to Ethan when her 6-month contract ended? "There you are," James said, his expression brightening as she approached. "Ethan was just telling me about your plan to build a model sailboat together." "It was his idea," she replied, smiling at the boy. "He has a natural understanding of design. Takes after his father, I suspect." Ethan beamed at the comparison. "Dad said he'd help too. We're going to sail it in the cove when it's finished." "That sounds wonderful." Olivia couldn't help but notice how Ethan now freely used the word dad instead of the more formal father he'd employed when she first arrived. The orchestra began a slow, elegant waltz, and James turned to her with an uncharacteristic hint of uncertainty. "Would you care to dance?" The question caught her off guard. I'm not very good at formal dancing." "I'll lead," he promised, extending his hand. Heart pounding, she accepted, allowing him to guide her to the dance floor. His hand was warm at her waist, his other firmly clasping hers as they moved together to the music. After a few moments of concentration, Olivia relaxed into the rhythm, surprised at how naturally they fell into sync. "You're full of surprises, Mr. Montgomery," she murmured. "I wouldn't have taken you for a dancer." "Catherine insisted we take lessons before our wedding," he replied, a hint of nostalgia softening his features. "She said any man who could navigate a sailing vessel in a storm should be able to navigate a ballroom." It was the first time he'd voluntarily mentioned his late wife to her, and Olivia recognized the significance of the moment. "She sounds like she was an extraordinary woman." She was. His eyes held Olivia's, something unspoken passing between them. "And she would have liked you, I think. Your kindness, your patience with Ethan, the way you see people, not just their circumstances." The compliment warmed her from within. As they continued to dance, the room seemed to fade around them, the space between their bodies charged with unacknowledged tension. When his thumb absently stroked the back of her hand, Olivia felt the touch like electricity down her spine. "James," she began, uncertain what she even wanted to say. "I know," he replied quietly, understanding in his eyes. "This is complicated." The music drew to a close, breaking the spell. As they stepped apart, Olivia became aware of curious glances directed their way, including Victoria's narrowed gaze from across the room. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of polite conversation and silent awareness of James's proximity. By the time they collected a sleepy Ethan and headed home, Olivia's emotions were a tangled mess of attraction, apprehension, and conflicting loyalties. The drive back to the estate was quiet, with Ethan dozing in the back seat and James focused on the winding coastal road. When they arrived, he carried his son upstairs while Olivia lingered in the foyer, unsure whether to follow or retreat to her room. James returned a few minutes later, his bow tie undone and hanging loose around his neck, making him look more approachable than she'd ever seen him. "He didn't even wake up when I changed him into his pajamas," he said with a soft chuckle. "Too much excitement, I suppose." "He had a wonderful time," Olivia confirmed. "He's making progress, James, real progress." "Thanks to you." He took a step closer, his expression serious. "You've changed things here, Olivia. You've brought light back into this house, into our lives." The sincerity in his voice made her chest ache. "I care about both of you very much." "I know." Another step closer. "And I find myself thinking about you. More than I should, perhaps." Olivia's heart raced, the moment balanced on a knife's edge of possibility. "James, The ringing of his phone shattered the moment. With an apologetic glance, he answered it, his expression immediately shifting to concern. "Yes. Speaking. When? I understand. I'll be there first thing in the morning." He ended the call, his professional mask sliding back into place. "I apologize, but there's an issue at the London office that requires my immediate attention. I'll need to fly out tomorrow." "Of course," Olivia said, stepping back, the spell broken. "Don't worry about Ethan. We'll be fine." He nodded, gratitude and something else, regret perhaps, in his eyes. "Good night, Olivia." "Good night, James." As she made her way to her room, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted between them. A door opened that might not easily be closed again. The following morning was a flurry of activity as James prepared for his unexpected trip. Ethan took the news of his father's departure with resigned acceptance. A reminder that despite recent improvements, this was a pattern all too familiar to him. "I'll call every night before bed," James promised as he knelt to hug his son goodbye. "And I'll be back in time for your sailing club competition next weekend." "You always say that," Ethan muttered, though he clung to his father tightly. Pain flashed across James's face. "This time I mean it, buddy. Nothing will keep me away." After James departed, Olivia and Ethan settled into their routine, though she noticed the boy was quieter than usual, his previous night's excitement replaced by a wary sadness. "How about we start working on that model boat today?" she suggested, hoping to lift his spirits. He shrugged, pushing his breakfast around his plate. "What's the point? Dad won't be here to help anyway." "He'll be back for your competition, Ethan," he promised. "Adults always promise," he replied with a wisdom beyond his years. "Doesn't mean they keep them." The words stung, not because they were directed at her, but because she recognized the truth in them. Despite her best intentions, wasn't she just another adult who would eventually leave him? The day passed slowly, with Ethan reluctantly engaging in his lessons and rejecting most of Olivia's attempts at conversation. By evening, she was beginning to worry about his regression when Mrs. Reynolds appeared with a package. "This arrived for the boy," she said, handing over a medium-sized box. "Special delivery." Ethan's curiosity finally overcame his mood. He opened the package to find a beautifully crafted model boat kit, complete with detailed instructions and all the necessary materials. A note in James's distinctive handwriting read, "To get you started. I'll be home to help with the sales. Love, Dad." The gesture transformed Ethan's demeanor. He insisted on starting the project immediately, and they spent the evening at the kitchen table, sorting tiny pieces and studying the instructions with intense concentration. When James called that night, Ethan chatted animatedly about their progress, and Olivia couldn't help but feel a rush of affection for the man who, despite his flaws, was trying so hard to be the father his son needed. After Ethan went to bed, James called again. "Is he really okay?" he asked, the background noise suggesting he was calling from an airport lounge. "He is," she assured him. "The boat kit was perfect, James. It meant a lot to him." "And to you?" The question was tentative, unlike his usual confidence. "It showed me you're listening." To both of us, a pause. "About last night, Olivia, what I said—" "It's all right," she interrupted, suddenly afraid of where the conversation might lead. "We were caught up in the moment. The gala, the dancing." "That's not—" He sighed. "Perhaps this is a conversation better had in person." "Perhaps it is." After they hung up, Olivia stood at her window, watching the moonlight on the waves and wondering if she was making a terrible mistake, allowing herself to care so deeply for this man and his son. The next few days fell into a peaceful rhythm. Ethan's mood remained positive, especially when working on the model boat, which was taking shape under their combined efforts. James called each night as promised, speaking first with his son and then with Olivia, their conversations growing increasingly personal, as the physical distance seemed to make emotional closeness safer. On Wednesday afternoon, as they were returning from the local library with books on shipbuilding to enhance their project, Olivia was surprised to find a sleek red convertible parked in the driveway. "That's Ms. Harrington's car," Ethan said, his enthusiasm dimming slightly. Victoria emerged from the house as they approached, her casual elegance somehow making Olivia's simple sundress and sandals feel shabby in comparison. "Ethan, darling," she exclaimed, embracing the boy with practiced affection, "I've missed you." And Olivia, How lovely to see you again. Victoria, Olivia acknowledged. This is unexpected. James didn't mention you'd be stopping by. Oh, it was a spur-of-the-moment decision. I had some documents James needs to sign for a new investment opportunity, and I thought, why not deliver them personally and check on my favorite little sailor? She ruffled Ethan's hair. And I come bearing gifts. There's a new ice cream shop in town that everyone's raving about. What do you say we go try it out? Ethan looked to Olivia uncertainly. We were going to work on our boat. The boat can wait. Surely, Victoria said with a dismissive wave. Ice cream waits for no one, especially on a warm day like today. Sensing Ethan's discomfort at being caught between them, Olivia smiled. Ice cream sounds wonderful. Why don't we all go? Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Actually, I was hoping for some quality time with Ethan. James mentioned you might appreciate a break. Being a full-time caregiver can be so taxing. The implication that she was merely a caregiver, and a tired one at that, wasn't lost on Olivia. Before she could respond, Ethan spoke up. Olivia comes too, or I don't want to go, he stated firmly, reaching for Olivia's hand. Something flashed in Victoria's eyes. Frustration, perhaps, or something harder to name, but her recovery was swift. Of course she's welcome. The more the merrier. Shall we take my car? It's such a beautiful day for a drive with the top down. The outing was a study in subtle power plays. Victoria dominated the conversation, regaling Ethan with stories about his parents from before you were born, when your mother and father and I were inseparable friends. Each anecdote served to underscore her long history with the family, and by extension, Olivia's status as a newcomer. At the ice cream parlor, Victoria insisted on treating them, waving away Olivia's offer to pay with a casual, "Don't be silly, dear. I know what childcare positions pay these days." On the drive back, Victoria maneuvered the conversation toward James's business dealings and the future of Montgomery shipping. Your father is considering some significant changes, she told Ethan. Expansion into Asian markets, possibly relocating headquarters to Boston. It's all very exciting. Olivia noticed Ethan's shoulders tense at the mention of relocation. James hasn't mentioned any of this to me, she said carefully. Victoria's laugh was light but dismissive. Well, why would he? These are complex business decisions. James confides in me about his professional life, just as I'm sure he values your input regarding Ethan's daily routine. The hierarchy was clear. Victoria for important matters, Olivia for the mundane. When they returned to the estate, Victoria insisted on coming inside to drop off these crucial documents. Once there, she moved through the house with the familiarity of someone who'd spent considerable time within its walls. I should check these measurements before I leave, she commented, producing a small tape measure from her purse as they passed the formal dining room. James mentioned wanting to update some of the furniture, and I offered to help. I know his taste so well, you see. Olivia's unease grew as Victoria continued to stake her claim on various aspects of the Montgomery home and family. After what felt like an eternity, Victoria finally prepared to leave, but not before delivering a parting shot wrapped in a smile. Oh, I nearly forgot to mention. James called me this morning. His meetings are going so well that he's extending his trip through the weekend. Business opportunities wait for no one, as he always says. She directed her attention to Ethan, whose face had fallen. I'm sure he'll make it up to you, darling. He always does. After Victoria departed, Ethan retreated to his room without a word, leaving Olivia standing in the foyer with a growing sense of dread. If James missed the sailing competition, the fragile trust they'd been building would suffer a devastating blow. That evening, when James called, Ethan refused to come to the phone. He's upset, Olivia explained, trying to keep accusation from her tone. Victoria mentioned you're extending your trip through the weekend. A beat of silence. That's not what I told her. The meetings are wrapping up tomorrow as planned. I specifically said I'd be back for Ethan's competition. Relief washed over Olivia, followed immediately by confusion. She was very clear about it, James. Said you'd called her this morning. I did call her about the Robinson contract, but I never mentioned extending the trip. Quite the opposite. I emphasized that I needed to be home by Friday. His voice had taken on an edge she'd never heard before. This isn't the first time Victoria has editorialized our conversations. The implications of this revelation settled uncomfortably between them. She spent quite a bit of time here today, Olivia said carefully. Brought Ethan ice cream, dropped off documents, measured the dining room for new furniture. New furniture? What are you talking about? I haven't discussed furniture with Victoria. A chill ran down Olivia's spine. She seemed very at home here, James. Very invested in your future plans. The line went quiet for a moment. Victoria and I have a complicated history, he finally said. We dated briefly before I met Catherine. She's never quite accepted that it didn't work out, but she's brilliant with finances, and until now I believed she could separate personal feelings from professional obligations. James, I think you need to have a serious conversation with her when you return. She told Ethan you're considering relocating to Boston. His sharp intake of breath was audible. That's completely false. We discussed expanding our offices there, nothing more. A heavy sigh. I'll deal with Victoria when I return. In the meantime, please tell Ethan I'll be home on Friday as promised. I'd never miss his competition. After they hung up, Olivia went to Ethan's room and found him sitting on his window seat, staring out at the ocean. Your dad just called, she said, sitting beside him. He wanted me to tell you that he is absolutely coming home on Friday, in plenty of time for your competition. Victoria was mistaken. Hope and wariness battled in his expression. Really, really. He promised, and this time, I believe he's going to keep that promise. Ethan considered this. Ms. Harrington said that you wouldn't be staying with us much longer. That Dad was interviewing new nannies in Boston. The statement hit Olivia like a physical blow. Did she now? He nodded solemnly. She said you're just temporary, and that's why I shouldn't get too attached. Is that true? Olivia chose her words carefully, mindful of the delicate balance between honesty and reassurance. What's true is that I originally came here for a 6-month position. That was our agreement. But Ethan, I care about you very much, and I'm not thinking about leaving anytime soon. But eventually you will. It wasn't a question. She couldn't bring herself to lie to him. Eventually, most people move on to different chapters in their lives, but that doesn't mean the connections we make disappear. Some people stay in our hearts forever, even if they can't stay in our daily lives. He absorbed this with the seriousness that always made her heart ache for his lost childhood. I wish you could stay forever, he said quietly. Oh, Ethan. She wrapped an arm around his small shoulders. Let's not worry about forever right now. Let's focus on your sailing competition this weekend, and your dad coming home and finishing our amazing model boat. Can we do that? He nodded, leaning into her embrace. Olivia, I think Miss Harrington doesn't like you very much. The observation, delivered with a child's blunt perception, startled a laugh from her. What makes you say that? The way she looks at you when she thinks no one is watching, like how Tommy Wilson looks at me at sailing club when I do better than him at tying knots. Out of the mouths of babes, Olivia thought wryly. Well, sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings just like kids do. The important thing is how we handle those feelings. That night, Olivia found herself unable to sleep, Victoria's machinations playing on repeat in her mind. The woman clearly saw her as competition, but for what exactly? James's affection? His trust? His fortune? Or was it simply the position Olivia now occupied in Ethan's life that Victoria coveted? Whatever the motivation, Victoria's willingness to manipulate an 8-year-old child to achieve her goals revealed a disturbing lack of boundaries. What might she do next if she felt truly threatened? The next morning brought an unexpected delivery. A large arrangement of white lilies with a card that read simply, "Counting the hours until I'm home. Jay." The gesture was so uncharacteristically romantic that Olivia found herself blushing as Mrs. Reynolds raised an eyebrow while setting the vase on the kitchen island. "Seems Mr. Montgomery has found something in London to improve his mood," the housekeeper commented with the faintest hint of a smile. Ethan was equally intrigued when he came down for breakfast. "Dad never sends flowers," he observed, examining the blooms with curiosity, "except on Mom's birthday." The comment gave Olivia pause. It did seem out of character for the reserved, practical man she'd come to know. But then again, hadn't he been revealing new sides of himself recently? Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "Did you receive my small token of appreciation?" She replied, "They're beautiful. Thank you. Ethan says this is unusual behavior for you." His response came quickly. "I'm discovering I'm capable of change." The exchange left her feeling both elated and uneasy. Their relationship was evolving into something neither of them had anticipated. complicated by professional boundaries, Ethan's vulnerability, and Victoria's apparent hostility. The day passed in a blur of activity as Olivia helped Ethan prepare for his competition, checking his sailing gear and reviewing the course map with him. His excitement grew as Friday approached, especially after James called to confirm his flight would land early Friday morning. "See? He's keeping his promise," Olivia reminded Ethan as she tucked him in Thursday night. "I know," the boy replied with a small smile. "I think he's different now because of you." The simple observation carried a weight that followed Olivia to her room. Was she changing James? Was that a good thing? And what changes was he creating in her? She was pondering these questions when her phone rang. Expecting James, she was surprised to see Blackwater Cove Medical Center on the caller ID. "Hello? Ms. Bennett, this is Dr. Sharma from the medical center. I'm calling about your recent test results." Confusion washed over her. "I think there's been a mistake. I haven't had any tests done recently." A pause. "Are you not Olivia Bennett, caregiver at the Montgomery estate?" "I am, but—" "Then I'm afraid there's no mistake. We have your blood work from Tuesday's occupational health screening. It's standard procedure for all childcare workers in private homes. The paperwork was submitted by— let me see. A Ms. Victoria Harrington listed as the family's representative. A cold dread settled in Olivia's stomach. "Doctor, I never authorized any tests, nor did I provide any blood samples. Whatever paperwork Ms. Harrington submitted is fraudulent." Now it was the doctor's turn to sound confused. I see, this is highly irregular. Perhaps you should come in tomorrow to discuss this matter in person." "I'll do that," Olivia agreed, her mind racing. "But may I ask what these supposed test results showed? What was Ms. Harrington trying to accomplish?" Dr. Sharma hesitated. "I shouldn't really discuss this over the phone, but given the circumstances, the results indicated elevated liver enzymes consistent with early-stage hepatitis. It would have necessitated your immediate removal from childcare duties, particularly around children with, shall we say, significant family resources." The implication was clear. Victoria had attempted to manufacture a medical reason to have Olivia dismissed, one that would alarm any parent enough to act without question. "Thank you for calling me directly," Olivia said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll be in first thing tomorrow to sort this out." After hanging up, Olivia sat motionless on the edge of her bed, trying to process the lengths to which Victoria had gone to remove her from the Montgomery household. The fabricated medical condition was calculated to trigger both professional concerns and personal fears for James, who had already lost his wife to tragedy. Her first instinct was to call James immediately, but she hesitated. He was flying home in the morning, and this conversation needed to happen face to face. Besides, confronting Victoria required evidence, not just accusations. With newfound determination, Olivia made a plan. Tomorrow morning she would visit the medical center, document the fraudulent submission, and then meet James at the airport instead of waiting at home as planned. She needed to reach him before Victoria did. What she didn't realize was that Victoria had anticipated this possibility and was already setting in motion the final piece of her scheme, one that would exploit James's deepest fear and turn it against the woman who had begun to heal his broken family. Dawn broke over Blackwater Cove, with ominous grey clouds gathering on the horizon, a fitting backdrop for the tension brewing in Olivia's mind as she dressed hurriedly. She'd barely slept, her thoughts consumed by Victoria's manipulations and what they revealed about the woman's desperation. The fabricated medical report wasn't just unethical, it was potentially criminal. After checking that Ethan was still asleep, Olivia left a note for Mrs. Reynolds explaining she had an early errand to run, but would be back in time to take Ethan to school. The drive to the Blackwater Cove Medical Center took her along the coastal road, where angry waves crashed against the rocks below, mirroring the turmoil she felt within. The medical center was quiet at this early hour, with only a skeleton staff manning the reception area. Dr. Sharma, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a serious demeanor, was waiting for her. "Ms. Bennett, thank you for coming in," she said, leading Olivia to a small private office. "I've pulled the paperwork in question, and I must say this situation is deeply concerning." She laid out several documents on the desk. "This is the authorization form supposedly signed by you, along with the requisition for blood work submitted by Ms. Harrington." She claimed to be acting as the Montgomery family's healthcare proxy, which raised no red flags given her long association with them. Olivia examined the signature on the form, a reasonable approximation of her own, but with subtle differences she could easily point out. "This isn't my signature, and I never authorized any tests. I suspected as much after our conversation," Dr. Sharma said grimly. "What troubles me most is that the blood sample itself must have come from somewhere, or someone. The results show genuine abnormalities, just not yours. Can you provide me with copies of all these documents? And perhaps a statement confirming that I've never been your patient?" The doctor nodded. "Already prepared. I've also notified our legal department. Falsifying medical records is a serious offense, Ms. Bennett. If you choose to pursue this matter, the hospital will cooperate fully." "Thank you," Olivia said, tucking the folder of evidence into her bag. "I need to speak with Mr. Montgomery first. This involves his family, and he should decide how to proceed." As she left the medical center, Olivia checked her watch. James's flight was due to land in less than an hour at the small regional airport 20 minutes away. If she hurried, she could meet him there before he even reached the house, before Victoria had any chance to intercept him with her fabricated concerns. The airport was little more than a single terminal serving private jets and a few commercial regional flights. Olivia parked and hurried inside, checking the arrivals board to confirm James's flight was on time. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Reynolds. "Ethan up and asking for you. Told him about your note. He seems anxious about today." Olivia quickly replied, reassuring the housekeeper that she'd be back soon to take Ethan to school and help him prepare for his sailing competition. As she sent the message, an announcement indicated that James's flight had landed. She positioned herself near the arrivals gate, her heart racing with anticipation and anxiety. How would he react to the evidence of Victoria's deception? Would he believe her, or would his long history with Victoria cloud his judgment? Passengers began streaming through the gate, and then she saw him. Tall, distinguished even in casual travel clothes, his expression brightening visibly when he spotted her waiting. "Olivia," he said, genuine pleasure warming his voice as he approached. "This is unexpected." "I needed to see you before you got home," she replied, suddenly aware of how her impulsive decision might appear. "There's something important we need to discuss." Concern immediately replaced his smile. "Is Ethan all right?" "He's fine, excited about your return and his competition. This is about something else." She glanced around the bustling terminal. "Is there somewhere more private we can talk?" James nodded, guiding her toward a small airport lounge with his hand at the small of her back. "My membership should get us some privacy." Once seated in a quiet corner of the nearly empty lounge, Olivia opened her bag and withdrew the folder from the medical center. "Last night, I received a call from a Dr. Sharma at Blackwater Cove Medical Center, informing me that my recent blood work showed concerning results that would require me to stop working with children." James's brow furrowed. "What blood work?" "Exactly, I never had any tests done." She handed him the documents. "These forms, including a forged signature purporting to be mine, were submitted by Victoria. She claimed to be acting as your family's healthcare proxy." As James examined the papers, his expression shifted from confusion to shock, and finally to a cold anger she'd never witnessed before. I can't believe she would go this far. The fabricated results suggest I have early-stage hepatitis, a condition specifically chosen, I believe, to alarm you enough to dismiss me immediately without question." James set the papers down, his jaw tight. "Victoria has been acting increasingly possessive since you arrived. I attributed it to her usual territoriality, but this crosses every line." He looked up at Olivia, genuine regret in his eyes. "I'm so sorry you've been subjected to this. It's inexcusable." "It's not your fault," she assured him, "but we need to address it before it escalates further. She's already told Ethan that you're interviewing new nannies in Boston and that I won't be staying much longer." "She what?" James's voice rose sharply, drawing glances from across the lounge. He lowered it with visible effort. "When did she tell him this?" "During her impromptu visit yesterday. She also informed him you'd be extending your trip and missing his competition, which I now know was another lie." James ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration that humanized him. "I've allowed this situation to develop by ignoring signs that should have been obvious. Victoria has always had feelings, for me that I didn't reciprocate. After Catherine died, she positioned herself as indispensable to my business, to Ethan, to me. I was too lost in grief to recognize the pattern. And now? His eyes met hers, intense and certain. Now I see things very clearly. Victoria needs to be removed from our lives professionally and personally. He reached across the table, taking her hand. Olivia, these past weeks with you have shown me what I've been denying, that life continues, that happiness is still possible. You've brought warmth back into our home, helped me reconnect with my son, made me feel... He trailed off, searching for words, but was interrupted by his phone ringing. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. Speak of the devil. Victoria? He nodded, declining the call. She'll have to wait. This conversation is more important. Almost immediately, his phone buzzed with a text. Despite himself, James glanced at it, and Olivia saw his face drain of color. What is it? She asked, alarmed. It's from Victoria. She says there's an emergency at the house, that Ethan has been rushed to the hospital after collapsing with a high fever. He was already on his feet, gathering his belongings. I need to call Mrs. Reynolds. Olivia's blood ran cold. I just texted with her 20 minutes ago. She said Ethan was fine, just a little anxious about today. James put the phone to his ear, his free hand gripping the back of a chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. After several agonizing seconds, he spoke. Mrs. Reynolds? It's James. Is everything all right at the house? He listened, relief gradually replacing panic on his face. I see. And Ethan, he's getting ready for school? Another pause. No emergency, just a misunderstanding, thank you. He ended the call, his expression hardening into something dangerous. Ethan is perfectly fine. He's having breakfast and asking when you'll be back to help him pack his sailing gear. Another lie, Olivia said quietly, the implications sinking in. She's getting desperate. Dangerously so. James sat back down, rubbing his temples. Using my son's well-being to manipulate me is unforgivable. This ends today. They left the airport together, James insisting they take his waiting car service while updating his driver on their destination. Straight to the house, please, Michael. No detours. In the back seat, James called his lawyer, speaking in clipped, precise terms about Victoria's actions and the evidence they'd obtained. Olivia watched the familiar landscape pass by, still processing the morning's events and what they revealed about Victoria's obsession. My attorney will meet us at the house this afternoon, James informed her as he ended the call. He's also contacting the hospital's legal department to coordinate. Victoria will likely face serious consequences for the medical fraud alone. Olivia nodded, suddenly weary. I never wanted this kind of drama, James. I just came here to do a job, to help you and Ethan. His expression softened as he regarded her. And you've done so much more than that. You've helped us heal. After a moment's hesitation, he added, what I was trying to say at the airport, these weeks with you have shown me that I can feel again, that I'm ready to move forward. The question is, where do you see yourself in that future? The directness of the question caught her off guard. James, The car turned into the driveway of the Montgomery estate, and Olivia's words died in her throat. Victoria's red convertible was parked at the entrance. She's here, James muttered, his posture tensing. Stay close to me. They entered the house to find Ethan and Victoria in the kitchen, the boy still in his pajamas as Victoria prepared what appeared to be pancakes. Daddy, Ethan exclaimed, jumping up to race toward his father. You're home. James embraced his son tightly, relief evident in every line of his body. I promised I would be, didn't I? And I see Miss Harrington is making breakfast. Victoria turned from the stove, her smile faltering slightly at the sight of Olivia beside James. James, we weren't expecting you until later. I thought I'd surprise Ethan with his favorite breakfast before school. How thoughtful, James replied, his tone neutral but his eyes cold. Though I'm curious why you'd tell me Ethan had been rushed to the hospital when he's clearly fine. Victoria's composure slipped for just a second before she recovered. Oh, that silly misunderstanding. I was actually referring to last week's incident when he fell at sailing practice. I thought you hadn't been properly briefed about it. She directed a pointed look at Olivia. Some details seemed to get lost in communication. There was no incident at sailing practice, Ethan said, confusion clear on his young face. A tense silence filled the kitchen. Mrs. Reynolds appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with shrewd eyes before addressing Ethan. "Young man, why don't you go upstairs and get dressed for school? I laid out your clothes." Ethan looked reluctantly between the adults, sensing the undercurrents, but not understanding them. "Can Olivia help me pack my sailing gear for later?" "Of course I can," Olivia assured him, grateful for the excuse to remove him from the increasingly volatile situation. "Let's go do that now." As they headed upstairs, Olivia could feel Victoria's gaze burning into her back. In Ethan's room, she helped him change and gather his equipment for the afternoon's competition, all while trying to maintain a cheerful demeanor despite her churning anxiety about what was happening downstairs. "Is Miss Harrington in trouble?" Ethan asked suddenly, his perception once again surprising her. Olivia chose her words carefully. "Your dad needs to have a serious conversation with her about some choices she's made." "Is it because she lies?" The bluntness of his question made Olivia pause in folding his windbreaker. "What makes you ask that?" Ethan shrugged, avoiding her eyes as he fiddled with his sailing gloves. "I heard her on the phone yesterday. She was in Dad's study, and I was looking for a book. She didn't see me. She was talking to someone about you, saying you were sick and shouldn't be around children." Olivia's heart sank. "Did you believe her?" "No. You're the healthiest person I know. You can run faster than me, and you never get tired when we hike to the lighthouse." His logic was impeccable in its childish simplicity. "And you don't lie to me. Ever." The trust in his voice moved her deeply. "I try very hard to always be honest with you, Ethan, even when the truth is complicated. Is that why you told me you might not stay forever? Because it's the truth?" She sat beside him on the bed, choosing honesty over comfort. "Yes, I don't know what the future holds, but I want you to know that no matter what happens, my caring for you is real and lasting." He nodded solemnly, then asked the question she'd been dreading. "Do you love my dad?" The directness of it took her breath away. How could she explain the complex emotions she felt? Attraction, admiration, affection, still tentatively unfurling, to an 8-year-old who saw the world in more definitive terms. "I care about your father very much," she said carefully. "We're still getting to know each other in many ways. But you might love him someday." She smiled at his persistence. "It's possible. Would that be okay with you?" He considered this with endearing seriousness. "Yeah, he smiles more when you're around and he doesn't work as much." The highest praise imaginable from a child who had spent too long competing with spreadsheets and conference calls for his father's attention. A commotion from downstairs interrupted their conversation, raised voices, the sound of something shattering. Olivia rose quickly. "Stay here, Ethan, I need to check on something." "Is Dad okay?" Worry clouded his features. "I'm sure he is. Just stay put until I come back, all right?" She hurried downstairs to find a scene of barely contained chaos. Victoria stood in the center of the living room, a broken vase at her feet, her perfect composure completely shattered. "You ungrateful bastard!" she was shouting at James, who stood with rigid control, his face a mask of cold fury. "Everything I've done has been for you, to protect you and Ethan from people like her." She jabbed a finger toward Olivia as she entered. "Victoria, that's enough," James said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You've crossed too many lines, forging medical documents, lying about my son's health, attempting to manipulate and frighten an 8-year-old child. These aren't the actions of someone who cares about our family." "I am the only one who truly cares about your family." Victoria's voice rose hysterically. "I've been here through everything, Catherine's death, your grief, rebuilding the business. Where was she? Nowhere. She just waltzed in and bewitched you both with her sanctimonious caring act." Mrs. Reynolds appeared silently at Olivia's side. "Perhaps I should take the boy out for a while," she murmured. "This isn't something he should witness." Olivia nodded gratefully. "His sailing gear is packed. Maybe you could take him to the harbor early. Let him get comfortable with the conditions before his competition." The housekeeper nodded and disappeared upstairs, her discretion a blessing in the unfolding drama. Victoria had turned her attention to Olivia now, her elegant features contorted with rage. "You think you've won, don't you? The devoted nurse who sacrificed her career for her mother, now sacrificing herself for another broken family. It's quite the redemption story." "This isn't a competition, Victoria," Olivia replied evenly. "I came here to do a job." "Oh, please. I've seen how you look at him, how you've insinuated yourself into Ethan's affections. You've been plotting this from the beginning." James stepped between them. That's enough, Victoria. My attorney will be here within the hour. Until then, I suggest you leave my home. Victoria laughed, a brittle sound devoid of humor. Your attorney? Really, James? After everything we've been through, you'd take legal action against me. You falsified medical records, Victoria. You lied about my son being hospitalized. What did you think would happen? Something calculating entered her eyes. And who do you think the board of Montgomery Shipping will side with when they learn their CEO is having an affair with the help? How do you think your investors will react to your judgment being compromised by the first pretty face that caught your attention? Since Catherine, James didn't flinch. Threaten me all you want. It changes nothing. Our professional relationship is over, effective immediately. Carter will handle the transition of your duties to another financial advisor. For a moment, Victoria seemed genuinely shocked, as if she hadn't believed he would actually sever their business ties. Then her expression hardened into something cold and dangerous. You'll regret this, she said quietly. Both of you. She grabbed her purse and stalked toward the door, pausing only to deliver one final barb. She'll leave you too, James. Once the novelty wears off, once she realizes that beneath that controlled exterior, you're still the same emotionally stunted man Catherine complained about for years. And then where will you be? The door slammed behind her with a finality that echoed through the silent house. James stood motionless, Victoria's parting words clearly having found their mark. Olivia approached him cautiously. James. He turned to her, vulnerability visible beneath his carefully maintained composure. I'm sorry you had to witness that. Are you all right? A humorless smile crossed his face. Apparently I'm emotionally stunted. Catherine's professional assessment, according to Victoria. Don't, Olivia said softly. Don't let her poison memories of your marriage along with everything else. He sighed, the weight of the morning's confrontation settling on his shoulders. Victoria and Catherine were friends long before I met either of them. There may be grains of truth in what she says, however maliciously delivered. We all have flaws, James. What matters is that you're trying to be better for yourself and for Ethan. Before he could respond, Mrs. Reynolds appeared, Ethan in tow with his sailing gear and school backpack. We're heading out now, if that's all right, Mr. Montgomery. I thought it best given the circumstances. Of course, James agreed, instantly composing himself for his son's benefit. Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds. Ethan looked between the adults, clearly sensing the tension despite their efforts to shield him. Is Miss Harrington gone? Yes, she is, James confirmed, kneeling to his son's level. And she won't be coming around anymore, Ethan. I've realized she hasn't been a very good friend to our family. The boy considered this. Good. I didn't like the way she talked about Olivia, or Mom. James exchanged a surprised glance with Olivia. What did she say about your mother? Ethan shrugged with a child's attempt at nonchalance that didn't quite succeed. Just that Mom wouldn't like how things are now. But I don't think that's true. Mom always said being happy was the most important thing, and we're more happy now, aren't we? James pulled his son into a tight embrace, his voice thick with emotion. Yes, buddy. We are. Over Ethan's shoulder, his eyes met Olivia's, a world of unspoken feeling passing between them. Mrs. Reynolds gently interrupted the moment. We should be going if we're to get Ethan to school on time and still make it to the harbor before the competition. Right, James said, releasing his son. I'll meet you both at the harbor this afternoon. Nothing will keep me from watching you sail today, Ethan, I promise. Once they'd departed, an exhausted silence settled over the house. James loosened his tie, a man finally allowing himself to acknowledge the strain of the morning's events. I should have seen this coming, he said, more to himself than to Olivia. Victoria's behavior has been increasingly possessive for months, but I attributed it to her usual intensity. Obsession can be difficult to recognize when it's wrapped in the guise of loyalty and friendship, Olivia offered. He nodded, then gestured toward the study. I need a drink. Would you join me? The study felt different in daylight, less intimidating, more simply the room of a man with responsibilities and burdens. James poured 2 glasses of scotch, handing one to Olivia, before sitting heavily in one of the leather armchairs. When Catherine died, he began after a long silence, I thought my capacity for feeling anything deeply had died with her. I focused on work, on maintaining stability for Ethan, on simply getting through each day. Victoria was there, efficient and dependable, handling details I couldn't face. He took a sip of his drink, eyes fixed on some middle distance. I never encouraged her romantically. Quite the opposite. I made it clear that our relationship was strictly professional, but I can see now that I allowed her to integrate herself too deeply into our lives because it was convenient, because it meant I didn't have to engage fully. You were grieving, Olivia said gently. We all make choices in grief that we might not make otherwise, perhaps. But that doesn't absolve me of responsibility. He looked at her directly now. Victoria's actions are her own, but I created the conditions that allowed her to believe she had a claim on us. And now I need to clean up this mess, protect Ethan from any fallout and... He hesitated, something vulnerable entering his expression. And I need to tell you that what I started to say at the airport wasn't just a reaction to Victoria's machinations. These past weeks with you have awakened something I thought was permanently lost. Olivia's heart quickened. James, please let me finish. I know the timing is terrible. I know there are professional boundaries we've already begun to cross. I know Ethan's attachment to you complicates everything, but I can't pretend I don't feel something significant developing between us. The raw honesty in his voice moved her deeply. I feel it too, she admitted. But you're right. The timing is complicated. Ethan is already asking if I love you. James's eyebrows rose. He is? And what did you tell him? That I care about you very much and we're still getting to know each other. A smile touched his lips. A diplomatic answer. An honest one, she countered. James, I do care for you and for Ethan more than I expected to. But Victoria's obsession is a warning of what happens when boundaries blur and expectations go unaddressed. He nodded slowly. You're right, of course. We need to be careful, deliberate, for Ethan's sake as much as our own. He set his glass down and leaned forward. What if we were to restructure your position here, make it more formal, with clearer boundaries? What do you mean? Ethan's been thriving under your care, but he's also ready to return to regular school in the fall. What if, instead of a temporary live-in position, we discussed a more permanent arrangement? You as his after-school caregiver, with defined hours and professional separation. It would give us time to explore other aspects of our relationship without compromising your role in his life. The suggestion surprised her. You've given this some thought. More than some, he admitted. I've been considering it since before I left for London. Today's events only confirmed what I already knew, that you've become essential to us in ways neither of us anticipated. Before she could respond, his phone rang. That's likely my attorney, he said, checking the screen. I should take this. As James spoke with his lawyer, Olivia moved to the window watching storm clouds gather over the ocean. The morning's confrontation with Victoria had resolved one immediate threat, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the woman's parting words, "You'll regret this," weren't merely the empty threats of a wounded ego. Victoria had proven herself willing to go to extraordinary lengths, and people that obsessive rarely surrendered quietly. The coming storm wasn't just the one brewing over the Atlantic. It was the one Victoria might yet unleash upon them all. James ended his call and joined her at the window. Carter will be here in an hour. He believes we have a strong case against Victoria for the medical fraud, but he's concerned about potential business implications. Victoria knows a great deal about Montgomery Shipping's operations. Do you think she'd really try to damage your company? His expression was grim. I wouldn't have thought her capable of falsifying medical records either. Yet here we are. They stood in silence, watching the darkening sky, until James spoke again. Would you consider it? What I proposed about restructuring your role here? Olivia turned to face him, weighing her words carefully. I would. But James, we need to be certain this is what we both want, not just a reaction to Victoria's manipulations or the intensity of recent events. I understand. Perhaps we should take some time, a few weeks, to consider everything more carefully, after the dust settles. She nodded, relieved at his understanding. That seems wise. His hand found hers, warm and steady. But know this, Olivia Bennett. Whatever we decide, you've already changed us for the better. You've helped us find our way back to living, not just existing. The simple truth of his words touched her deeply. Whatever uncertainties lay ahead, whatever storms they might face, that fundamental change from existing to living was real and lasting. What neither of them could know was that Victoria had already set in motion events that would test their newfound strength and force them to confront not only her obsession, but also the lingering ghosts of James's past, a past that held secrets even he had yet to fully face. The harbour at Blackwater Cove buzzed with excitement as families gathered for the children's sailing competition. Colourful pennants snapped in the brisk wind, and small vessels bobbed at the docks while their young captains made final preparations. Despite the dark clouds lingering on the horizon, the mood was festive, a celebration of courage and skill that defined this coastal community. Olivia stood at the edge of the pier, watching Ethan confer seriously with his sailing instructor. The transformation in the boy over the past weeks was remarkable. His shoulders no longer hunched with perpetual caution, his smile coming more readily, his voice carrying across the wind with newfound confidence as he asked questions about the course. "He looks like a different child," James commented, appearing beside her with 2 steaming cups of coffee. He handed one to Olivia, their fingers brushing in a moment of connection that sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with the beverage. "Not different," she corrected gently. "Just more himself. The self that was always there, waiting for the right conditions to emerge." James's smile held a hint of wonder. "Your ability to see the best in people is remarkable, Olivia, even after everything with Victoria this morning." They'd spent the hours since Victoria's dramatic departure in practical matters, meeting with James's attorney, documenting the evidence of the forged medical records, changing security codes at the house, and arranging for a new financial advisor to review the Montgomery accounts. Necessary precautions, but insufficient to fully ease the lingering tension Victoria's threats had created. "Speaking of which," James continued, his voice lowering, "Carter's contact at the hospital confirmed they're taking the matter seriously. Victoria will likely face professional consequences at minimum. And your company? Any fallout there?" He shook his head. "Nothing concrete yet, but my executive team has been advised of the situation. We're monitoring for any unusual activity in our accounts or communications." A shadow crossed his face. "I still can't believe she'd go this far." "Obsession warps perception," Olivia said quietly. "In her mind, she was protecting you, not hurting you." "That's the most disturbing part," he agreed. "Her absolute conviction that she knew what was best for me, for Ethan, better than we did ourselves." Their conversation was interrupted by Ethan racing toward them, his face flushed with excitement beneath his sailing cap. "They're calling for competitors! I need to get to my boat!" James knelt to his son's level, adjusting his life vest with paternal care. "Remember what Coach Miller said about the wind conditions today. Respect the water, trust your training. And have fun," Olivia added with a smile. "That's the most important part." Ethan nodded solemnly, then impulsively threw his arms around both of them in a group hug that caught them by surprise. "I'm glad you're both here," he said simply before dashing back to the lineup of young sailors. As they watched him go, James's hand found Olivia's, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Thank you for being here," he said softly. "For everything." The race itself was a testament to youthful determination against the elements. The wind had picked up, creating challenging conditions for the small vessels as they navigated the marked course in the protected cove. From their vantage point near the judges' stand, Olivia and James tracked Ethan's progress with matching expressions of nervous pride. "He's handling the crosswind beautifully," James observed, as Ethan expertly adjusted his sail to maintain his position near the front of the pack. "Catherine would be so proud." The mention of his late wife, offered freely and without pain clouding his expression, marked another milestone in James's healing. Olivia squeezed his hand in silent acknowledgement. As the race entered its final leg, the sky darkened ominously, and the race officials exchanged concerned glances. The wind shifted suddenly, stronger and more erratic, sending several of the young sailors scrambling to adjust. Ethan, displaying remarkable poise, managed the change admirably, moving into second position as they approached the final marker. "Look at him go," Olivia exclaimed, caught up in the excitement despite her concern about the worsening weather. James's face shone with pride as his son executed a perfect tack, the maneuver giving him just enough advantage to cross the finish line in first place by a narrow margin. The small crowd erupted in cheers, none louder than James himself, who let out a whoop of joy that Olivia had never heard from the usually reserved man. Their celebration was cut short as the race officials began urgently signaling for the remaining competitors to return to shore immediately. The storm that had been threatening all afternoon was advancing more quickly than predicted, with dark, roiling clouds now dominating the horizon and the first fat raindrops beginning to fall. "I need to help Ethan secure his boat," James said, already moving toward the dock where the triumphant young sailors were bringing in their vessels. "Meet us at the car?" Olivia nodded, turning to gather their belongings from the viewing area. As she collected their coffee cups and Ethan's backpack, a familiar voice behind her sent a chill down her spine despite the warmth of the day. Quite the domestic scene, how touching. Victoria stood a few feet away, immaculate despite the increasing wind, her red dress a stark contrast to the darkening sky. Olivia noticed with alarm that she seemed unnaturally calm, her earlier hysteria replaced by an eerie composure. "Victoria, I didn't expect to see you here." "I wouldn't miss Ethan's big day," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I've been attending his events since before he could walk. Did you know that?" Olivia took a subtle step back, creating distance between them. "James made it clear this morning that your presence in their lives is no longer welcome." Victoria laughed, the sound brittle against the rising wind. "James doesn't always know what's best for him, or for Ethan. That's why he's needed me all these years." "I think today has proven otherwise," Olivia replied carefully, aware that they were increasingly isolated as other spectators hurried to their cars to escape the approaching storm. "They're doing just fine. For now," Victoria conceded, her gaze drifting toward the docks where James was helping Ethan secure his sailboat. "But you don't know everything about this family, Olivia. About James. About what really happened the day Catherine died." Despite herself, Olivia felt a flicker of unease. "What are you talking about?" Victoria's smile widened, satisfaction gleaming in her eyes at having captured Olivia's attention. "Has he told you about the argument they had before setting sail that day? About Catherine's ultimatum? About the text message he sent me just before the accident?" "Stop it," Olivia said firmly, recognizing the manipulation for what it was. "Whatever you're implying, I'm not interested in your poisonous insinuations." "Not insinuations, dear, facts." Victoria reached into her purse and withdrew her phone, tapping the screen a few times before holding it up. "See for yourself." Against her better judgment, Olivia glanced at the screen, which displayed a text message thread dated 2 years earlier. James's name was at the top, and the final message sent the day of the accident read, "She's threatening to leave. Take Ethan with her. I can't lose my son. We'll call you after we talk on the boat." Olivia's stomach clenched, but she forced her expression to remain neutral. "This proves nothing except that they were having marital problems. Many couples do." "True," Victoria agreed, putting her phone away. But coupled with the Coast Guard report noting that the sail was raised during a small craft advisory, despite James's extensive experience, well, it raises questions, doesn't it? Questions the local authorities might find interesting if they were to re-examine the case. The implication was unmistakable, and Olivia felt a surge of anger. "This is what you've resorted to." Threatening to accuse James of deliberately causing the accident that killed his wife, the mother of his child. "I'm not threatening anything," Victoria replied with false innocence. "I'm simply pointing out that your perfect James has secrets, dark ones, and Ethan deserves to be protected from people who might harm him, including his father if necessary." Thunder rumbled in the distance, punctuating her words with ominous timing. Olivia stared at the woman before her, finally understanding the true depth of her obsession. This wasn't just jealousy or possessiveness, it was a dangerously distorted perception that had twisted genuine concern into something toxic and potentially destructive. "You need help, Victoria," Olivia said quietly. "Professional help. This isn't love or protection, it's obsession." Victoria's composure cracked slightly, her eyes hardening. "Don't presume to analyze me. I've been part of this family longer than you can imagine. I was there when Catherine first suspected James was emotionally unavailable. I was there when she confided her unhappiness, her plans to leave. I was there to pick up the pieces after the accident, to make sure Ethan had stability while his father buried himself in work. And now you can't let go," Olivia observed. "Even though they're healing, moving forward. Your need to be needed is more important to you than their actual well-being." The first real flash of anger crossed Victoria's face. "You know nothing about what they need. You're a temporary distraction, a convenient caretaker. When James tires of you, and he will, I'll still be here. I always have been." "That's not your decision to make anymore," Olivia replied firmly. "James has made his position clear. Whatever happens between him and me, Your manipulation and deceit have permanently damaged your relationship with this family. Victoria took a step closer, her voice lowering to a dangerous whisper. I've invested too much in them to walk away now. If I have to expose James's darker side to protect Ethan from him, from both of you, I will. Before Olivia could respond, a voice called her name. She turned to see James and Ethan approaching, the boy clutching his trophy with pride despite being soaked from the now steady rain. We need to go, James called. The storm's picking up. He stopped abruptly as he registered Victoria's presence, his expression darkening. What are you doing here? Victoria's demeanor transformed instantly, a warm smile replacing her threatening glare. Just congratulating the sailing champion. What an impressive performance, Ethan. The boy shrank slightly behind his father, his earlier joy dimmed by Victoria's unexpected appearance. Thanks, he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. James placed a protective hand on his son's shoulder. We've said all we need to say to each other, Victoria. Please respect our wishes and stay away from my family. Your family, she repeated, something dangerous flickering in her eyes. Interesting choice of words, James. I wonder if you'll still consider it your family when certain truths come to light. A flash of confusion crossed his face, quickly replaced by wariness. What are you talking about? Ask your new confidant, Victoria replied, nodding toward Olivia. We've been having a fascinating discussion about the day Catherine died. James paled visibly, his grip on Ethan's shoulder tightening until the boy squirmed uncomfortably. Ethan, go wait in the car, he said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Olivia will go with you. But Dad, now Ethan. The sharpness in his tone brooked no argument. Ethan cast a worried glance between the adults before reluctantly moving toward the parking area. Olivia hesitated, torn between following him and staying to support James. Go, James said more gently. Make sure he's okay. I'll handle this. With a final warning look at Victoria, Olivia followed Ethan, catching up to him quickly and guiding him to the car as the rain intensified. Once inside, she helped him towel off with the blanket they kept in the trunk for beach outings, maintaining a cheerful demeanor despite her internal turmoil. Is Dad okay? Ethan asked, watching through the rain-streaked window as James and Victoria engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation. Is Ms. Harrington making him sad again? Your dad is very strong, Olivia assured him, though her own concern was mounting as the discussion outside showed no signs of concluding. He can handle difficult conversations. She's not going to be around anymore, right? Dad promised. That's right, your dad keeps his promises. Olivia squeezed his hand. Speaking of which, that was some amazing sailing out there today. Your dad was so proud, we both were. This successfully diverted him to an enthusiastic recounting of the race, allowing Olivia to divide her attention between his excited narrative and the confrontation outside. Through the rain, she could see James's posture grow increasingly rigid, his hands gesturing with barely contained emotion as Victoria maintained her eerily calm demeanor. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, James turned away from Victoria and strode toward the car, his face a mask of controlled fury. He slid into the driver's seat, water streaming from his hair and clothes, and started the engine without a word. Dad, are you okay? Ethan asked from the back seat. James visibly collected himself, forcing a smile as he met his son's eyes in the rearview mirror. I'm fine, buddy. Just wet and ready to get home. How about we stop for ice cream to celebrate your victory? The suggestion successfully distracted Ethan, but Olivia wasn't fooled. Whatever Victoria had said had shaken James deeply. She glanced back through the rear window as they pulled away, and saw Victoria still standing in the rain, watching them depart with an expression that sent chills down her spine. The stop for ice cream provided a welcome buffer, allowing James time to compose himself and Ethan to bask in the glow of his achievement. By the time they returned to the estate, the storm had intensified into a full gale, with wind howling around the cliffs and rain lashing against the windows. Mrs. Reynolds met them at the door with towels and hot chocolate, fussing over Ethan's damp hair and exclaiming appropriately over his trophy. A bath is drawn for you, young man, and your warmest pajamas are laid out. Can't have our champion catching cold. Once Ethan was safely upstairs with Mrs. Reynolds, Olivia turned to James, who had retreated to the window overlooking the turbulent ocean. We need to talk about what Victoria said, she stated quietly. His shoulders tensed, but he didn't turn around. Yes, I suppose we do. She showed me a text message, James, from the day of the accident, and she made implications about the circumstances of Catherine's death. Now he did turn, his expression haunted. And do you believe her implications? The question hung between them, charged with significance. Olivia considered her answer carefully, aware that they stood at a critical juncture in their relationship. I believe there's context she deliberately withheld, Olivia replied honestly. I believe she's manipulating fragments of truth to serve her obsession, and I believe that whatever happened that day was a tragic accident that you would give anything to undo. Some of the tension left his body, though his eyes remained troubled. She's threatening to go to the authorities with her theory if I pursue legal action against her for the medical fraud. Can she really cause problems? Legally, I mean? James sighed heavily, running a hand through his still damp hair. Probably not. The Coast Guard investigation was thorough, but she could create enough public suspicion to impact the company and worse, to reach Ethan's ears. His voice broke slightly. The thought of my son questioning whether I had any role in his mother's death. Then we need to tell him the truth first, Olivia said firmly. Whatever that is, before Victoria has a chance to poison it. James looked at her with surprise. You would advise that? Burdening an 8-year-old with the complexities of his parents' marital problems? Not all the adult details, no, but children sense when there are secrets, James. They imagine worse scenarios than reality. Ethan deserves an age-appropriate understanding of what happened, especially if Victoria might try to twist the narrative. He was silent for a long moment, considering. You're right, he finally said, but not tonight. Tonight he deserves to celebrate his victory and sleep soundly. Agreed. Tomorrow is soon enough. They stood in companionable silence, watching the storm rage outside until James spoke again. Aren't you going to ask me about what really happened that day? Olivia met his gaze steadily. Only if you want to tell me. The simple response seemed to touch something deep within him. He moved to the small bar in the corner of the room, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey and handing one to Olivia before settling heavily into one of the armchairs. Catherine and I were struggling, he began, his voice low and measured. Had been for some time. She felt I was too consumed by the business, too emotionally unavailable. She wasn't wrong. He took a sip of his drink, gathering his thoughts. That morning she told me she was considering a separation, taking Ethan to stay with her sister in California while we sorted things out. Olivia sat across from him, listening without judgment. I was desperate at the thought of losing access to my son, suggested we talk it through during our planned sale that afternoon. A chance to reconnect, I said. A bitter smile crossed his face. In reality, I was buying time, trying to find the right words to convince her to stay. That's understandable, James. He shook his head. What came next wasn't. The weather forecast showed a small craft advisory, but I insisted we go anyway. Catherine was reluctant, but I persuaded her. Said we needed the privacy, away from the house, from distractions. His knuckles whitened around his glass. I was a skilled sailor, confident in my abilities. Too confident. The wind howled outside, an eerie counterpoint to his narrative. The squall hit faster than predicted. We should have lowered the sail immediately, but I was distracted, still arguing my case, trying to make her understand that splitting up our family wasn't the answer. His voice grew hoarse. By the time I recognized the danger, it was too late. The boom swung violently during a sudden gust. Catherine was knocked overboard before I could react. Olivia felt her throat tighten with empathy for his pain. It was an accident, James. An accident born of my arrogance, my refusal to postpone a difficult conversation, my putting my needs above safety considerations. His eyes, when they met hers, were raw with guilt. I dove in after her, searched until my lungs burned, but the water was so cold, the visibility so poor. By the time the Coast Guard found me, I was nearly hypothermic myself. You did everything you could, Olivia said softly. Did I? Or did my stubbornness, my emotional limitations create the conditions for tragedy? He drained his glass. That's what Victoria is threatening to expose, not that I deliberately caused the accident, but that my flawed character contributed to it. And the worst part is, she's not entirely wrong. Olivia moved to kneel beside his chair, taking his hand in hers. Listen to me, James. We all make decisions we regret. We all have moments where our judgment is clouded by emotion. That doesn't make us murderers, it makes us human. He looked down at their joined hands, Victoria was there afterward, when I was drowning in guilt and grief. She knows my darkest thoughts from that time, things I said when I could barely function. Now she's weaponizing that vulnerability. Because she's desperate, Olivia reminded him, because she's losing her place at the center of your world. I never put her there, he insisted. She inserted herself, made herself indispensable when I was too broken to establish proper boundaries. And now you're reclaiming those boundaries. That's healthy, James, necessary for you and for Ethan. He searched her face. Even knowing all this, my failures as a husband, the poor judgment that cost Catherine her life, you still believe in me. I believe in who you are now, she replied without hesitation. The man who's learning from past mistakes, who's putting his son's needs first, who's working to open his heart again despite the risk of pain, that man deserves a second chance at happiness. Something shifted in his expression, a releasing of tension, a dawning hope. Slowly, he raised his hand to touch her cheek. You are remarkable, Olivia Bennet. The intimate moment was interrupted by a crash of thunder, so loud it seemed to shake the foundations of the house, followed immediately by the lights flickering and going out, plunging them into darkness. Perfect timing, James commented wryly, the tension broken. There should be emergency generators for essential systems, but they take a minute to engage. As if on cue, dim emergency lighting flickered on in the hallway, casting long shadows through the doorway. From upstairs came the sound of Ethan's frightened voice calling for his father. I'll check the breakers, James said, rising. Would you go to Ethan? Of course. They parted in the hallway, James heading toward the utility room while Olivia made her way upstairs. She found Ethan sitting up in bed, clutching his stuffed whale, eyes wide with apprehension. It's just a power outage, she assured him, sitting on the edge of his bed. The storm knocked out the electricity. Your dad's checking the breakers now. Will the ocean come up to the house? He asked, his voice small. Sometimes in big storms the waves get really high. We're safe here, she promised. The house has stood on this cliff for over 100 years, through countless storms. And your dad and I are here with you. Nothing bad is going to happen. He seemed to consider this, then asked unexpectedly, Is Miss Harrington going to do something bad? The question caught Olivia off guard. What makes you ask that? Ethan fidgeted with his whale. I heard her talking to Dad at the harbor. She sounded scary, and she was looking at you like she wanted to hurt you. Olivia chose her words carefully. Ms. Harrington is very upset right now because things are changing in ways she didn't expect. Sometimes when adults are upset, they say things they don't really mean, like when Dad and Mom used to argue. The innocent question revealed how much more Ethan had observed and understood than the adults in his life had realized. Yes, something like that. Your dad and I will make sure Ms. Harrington doesn't upset anyone anymore, okay? He nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. Can you stay until I fall asleep again? Of course I can. She smoothed his hair back from his forehead. Would you like me to tell you a story? He nodded eagerly, settling back against his pillows as Olivia began an improvised tale about a brave young sailor who navigated through a terrible storm to discover a magical island. As his eyelids grew heavy, she kept her voice soft and rhythmic, a counterpoint to the raging storm outside. By the time James appeared in the doorway, Ethan was fast asleep, his face peaceful despite the occasional flashes of lightning that illuminated the room. Olivia carefully extracted herself from the edge of the bed and joined James in the hallway. Generators running the essential systems, he informed her quietly, but the main power might be out for hours. The storm has taken down lines all over the county. Ethan's worried about the ocean reaching the house, she told him, and about Victoria. He overheard enough at the harbor to be concerned. James's expression tightened. Another conversation for tomorrow, it seems. The list grows. They made their way downstairs, where James had lit several candles in the living room, creating a warm, flickering glow that softened the harsh edges of the night. Outside, the storm continued unabated, rain lashing against the windows and wind moaning around the eaves of the old house. It's strange, James observed as they settled on the sofa. This house hasn't felt like a home in 2 years. Even with all the luxurious furnishings, the expensive art, it's been more mausoleum than living space. Yet tonight, with the electricity gone and candles burning, it finally feels right. It's not the power outage, Olivia said gently. It's you. You're present here now, not just physically, but emotionally. That's what makes a house a home. He considered this, then nodded slowly. "You're right. For too long, I've been haunting these rooms rather than inhabiting them, going through the motions of living without truly engaging." His gaze met hers in the candlelight. "Until you arrived and disrupted my carefully constructed numbness." The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable in a way that would have been impossible for him just weeks ago. Olivia felt the significance of the moment, a turning point not just for James but for both of them. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Now," he replied, reaching for her hand, "we face what comes together: Victoria's threats, Ethan's questions, the complications of redefining your role here, all of it. If you're willing." "I am," she assured him. "But we need to be thoughtful, especially about Ethan. He's been through so much change already." James nodded. "We'll move at a pace that gives him security and stability. No rushed decisions." "And Victoria?" His expression hardened. "Carter advised against legal action for now, given her threats. But he's documenting everything, building a case. If she escalates, we'll be prepared." A particularly violent gust of wind rattled the windows, making them both glance toward the sound. The storm showed no signs of abating, its fury a physical manifestation of the emotional turbulence they'd weathered throughout the day. "Stay here tonight," James said suddenly. "Not in your usual room, here with me. Just to talk, to be together. I don't want to be alone with my thoughts during this storm." The request, so honest in its vulnerability, touched Olivia deeply. "I'll stay," she agreed, settling more comfortably beside him on the sofa, "for as long as you need." Through the long hours of the night, as the storm raged outside and occasional crashes suggested damage to the grounds, they talked, really talked, with a depth and honesty that stripped away pretenses. James spoke of his childhood in this very house, of his complicated relationship with his own father, of meeting Catherine in college and falling in love with her vibrant spirit, of the joy and terror of becoming a parent, of the crushing guilt and grief following her death. Olivia shared her own journey, her passion for nursing derailed by her mother's illness, the painful years of watching her only family member slowly slip away, the freedom and uncertainty that followed, the unexpected sense of purpose and belonging she'd found with the Montgomerys. As dawn approached, the storm finally began to recede, the howling wind diminishing to occasional gusts, the torrential rain softening to a steady patter. They had shifted positions throughout the night, and now Olivia found herself with her head resting against James's shoulder, his arm around her, both physically and emotionally closer than they had ever been. "I should check on Ethan," James murmured, though he made no move to rise. "He'll be up soon." "In a minute," Olivia agreed, equally reluctant to break the peaceful moment. The sound of small feet on the stairs made the decision for them. Ethan appeared in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep, eyes widening slightly at the sight of them together on the sofa. "Is the storm over?" he asked, padding into the room. "Almost," James replied, making room for his son to join them. "How did you sleep?" "Okay." Ethan settled between them, looking around at the candles burned low in their holders, the dim morning light filtering through rain-streaked windows. "The house looks different." "Different how?" Olivia asked. He considered this with childish seriousness. "More like a home and less like a museum." James laughed, the sound startling in its genuine joy. "That's exactly what we were saying last night." Ethan beamed at this connection, then grew more solemn. "Dad, can we talk about Miss Harrington now? And about Mom?" James exchanged a surprised glance with Olivia over their son's head, not missing the significance of the word "our" in Ethan's question. "Yes, buddy, we can. But first, how about some breakfast? Everything's better with a full stomach." The three of them moved to the kitchen, where the gas stove still worked despite the power outage. Working together, they prepared a simple meal of scrambled eggs and toast. There was something profoundly intimate about the domestic scene, passing plates, sharing the orange juice that had survived in the refrigerator, planning how to assess storm damage once it was fully light outside. When they'd eaten, James took a deep breath and addressed his son's earlier question. "About Ms. Harrington, Ethan. She's going through a difficult time right now, and she's not thinking clearly. She might say things that aren't true or that are meant to upset us, but Olivia and I are handling it, and you don't need to worry." Ethan nodded, accepting this with remarkable composure. "And about Mom?" James hesitated, clearly searching for the right words. Olivia reached across the table and squeezed his hand in silent support. "Your mum was an amazing person," James began carefully. "She loved you more than anything in the world. But you know that adults sometimes have problems they need to work out, right?" Ethan nodded again. "Like when you and Mom used to argue about your work." "Yes, exactly like that. Before the accident, Mom and I were having some grown-up problems. We were trying to figure out how to fix them, but we were both sad and frustrated." James swallowed hard. "The day of the accident, we went sailing even though the weather wasn't good. Because I thought it would give us a chance to talk without distractions. That was a mistake, one I'll regret for the rest of my life." "Because of the storm?" Ethan asked, his eyes wide with understanding beyond his years. "Yes. The storm came in faster and stronger than we expected, and—" James's voice faltered. "And accidents happen in bad weather," Olivia finished gently. "Even to people who are very careful and very skilled, like your dad." Ethan absorbed this, his young face serious. "So it wasn't anybody's fault? Just the storm?" "The storm and some poor decisions on my part," James admitted. "I should have checked the weather more carefully. I should have turned back sooner. There are many things I wish I'd done differently that day." "But you didn't want Mom to get hurt," Ethan stated with absolute certainty. "Never," James affirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "I would have given anything, everything to change what happened." Ethan was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then he asked the question that had clearly been weighing on his young mind. "Is that why you were sad for so long? Because you felt bad about the storm?" James nodded, unable to speak. "But you're not as sad now," Ethan observed, "since Olivia came." James found his voice again. "That's right, buddy. Olivia has helped us both remember how to be happy again, and that's a good thing. It doesn't mean we don't still love Mom and miss her. It just means we're learning to carry that love with us while we continue living." Ethan considered this, then turned to Olivia. "Are you going to stay with us, even after your job is done?" The directness of the question hung in the air between them. Olivia looked to James, who gave her a slight nod, permission to answer honestly. "I'd like to," she told Ethan, "but things might look a little different. I might not live here all the time, at least not right away. Your dad and I are still figuring out exactly what that means." "But you'll still be part of our family," Ethan persisted, getting to the heart of his concern. "Yes," she promised, her heart full. "I'll still be part of your family." The simple answer seemed to satisfy him. He nodded decisively, then changed tracks with the remarkable adaptability of children. "Can we go see if my boat is okay? The storm was really bad." James laughed, relief evident in his expression at having navigated the difficult conversation. "As soon as it's fully light, we'll assess the damage. I suspect there are quite a few branches down, maybe some roof damage." As if on cue, the main lights flickered and came back on, drawing a cheer from Ethan. The return of electricity seemed symbolic somehow. Life resuming its normal patterns after disruption, systems restored, order emerging from chaos. While Ethan ran upstairs to dress, James turned to Olivia, taking both her hands in his. "Thank you," he said simply, "for your strength, your wisdom with him, your everything. We're going to be okay," she assured him. "All of us. Better than okay, I think." He leaned forward, his intention clear, and Olivia met him halfway. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a promise rather than a passion, a beginning rather than a culmination. When they parted, James rested his forehead against hers. "We still have challenges ahead. Victoria won't give up easily, and there's the question of your professional role here, and 1,000 other complications. We'll face them together," Olivia replied. "One day at a time." The sound of Ethan thundering back down the stairs broke the moment. He appeared in his rain boots and jacket, eager to explore the storm's aftermath. "Come on, I want to see if the big oak tree is still standing." Hand in hand, they followed him into the brightening morning. The storm had indeed left its mark. Broken branches littered the lawn, a section of fencing had collapsed, and the garden looked battered. But the house stood firm. The old oak had weathered the gale, and overhead, the clouds were breaking to reveal patches of clear blue sky. As they surveyed the damage, planning repairs and cleanup, Olivia felt a profound sense of rightness. This wasn't the life she had imagined for herself, with its grand estate and complex family dynamics and lingering shadows of the past. But standing here with James and Ethan, facing the aftermath of both literal and metaphorical storms, she knew she was exactly where she belonged. In the months that followed, life settled into new patterns. Victoria made one final attempt at disruption, sending copies of James's text messages to several board members of Montgomery Shipping with insinuations about Catherine's death. But prepared for this possibility, James had already spoken candidly with his key executives about the accident and Victoria's obsessive behavior. Her attempt backfired spectacularly, resulting in her permanent removal from any association with the company and a restraining order preventing her from approaching the Montgomery family. Olivia did transition to a more defined role, moving into a cottage on the estate grounds while maintaining her own apartment in town, a balance that gave her independence while keeping her connected to the Montgomerys. She resumed her nursing career part-time at the local hospital, finding fulfillment in returning to her vocation while still being present for Ethan after school and on weekends. James, too, found healthier balance, delegating more responsibility at work to spend time with his son and nurture his growing relationship with Olivia. The sailing lessons continued, now with all three of them participating, their small fleet of vessels a common sight in the protected waters of Blackwater Cove. Healing, they discovered, wasn't a destination but a journey, one with setbacks and challenges alongside moments of unexpected joy. There were nights when James still woke from nightmares of the accident, days when Ethan withdrew into quiet grief for the mother he was gradually forgetting, times when Olivia questioned whether she could truly fill the spaces in their lives that needed filling. But there were far more moments of connection and growth. Ethan's triumphant return to regular school, where he made friends and thrived academically, James learning to express his emotions without fear, Olivia finding that her capacity for love extended naturally to this ready-made family that had claimed her heart. 1 year after Olivia first arrived at the Montgomery estate, they gathered on the terrace overlooking the ocean. James, Ethan, Olivia, Mrs. Reynolds, and a small circle of friends who had supported their journey. Under an arbor twined with white roses, with Ethan proudly serving as best man, James and Olivia exchanged vows that acknowledged their unconventional path to love and committed to walking the road ahead together, whatever storms might come. As the sun set over Blackwater Cove, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, the three of them stood at the cliff's edge, arms around each other, facing the endless horizon. "Are you happy, Dad?" Ethan asked, looking up at his father with eyes that had regained their childhood wonder. James gazed at his son, then at the woman who had helped them both find their way back to joy, his expression peaceful and certain. "Yes, buddy, I'm happy. We all are." And in that moment, with the sea breeze carrying away the last lingering shadows of the past, Olivia knew that happiness wasn't about perfect circumstances or absence of challenges. It was about finding the courage to open your heart again after loss, to risk vulnerability for the sake of connection, to build something new and beautiful from the broken pieces of what came before. It was, quite simply, about love, imperfect, resilient, and ultimately transformative.